What do you all think about the books that you have on the school curriculum, the ones you have to read for the inter now?
Not a lot.
Why, Leonid, what have you got to read for your course?
Julius Caesar.
And?
And I don't like it at all. And Pride and Prejudice.
And what's wrong with Julius Caesar?
The language, I think, really. It's just very hard to understand. And they ramble on too much as well. You know, the speeches, all the famous speeches, they just go on and on and on, and you don't know what they're talking about.
And what about Pride and Prejudice?
Well, that's not as bad, but it's very boring as well. You'd be talking about a scene or something, you know, and just start going back to things that happen, and then you lose what's already after happening, you know. It's not really very exciting.
Right, what about the rest of you? Would you all agree with that? Nigel, what do you think of Julius Caesar now, for instance?
You can't understand any of all this ye and thee and all this. You can't, all this funny language.
But what about the story? You're not interested in the story?
You can't get it.
Julius Caesar, they all just end up killing themselves in the end.
Yeah.
It's a bit pointless, really.
What sort of things would you like to see instead of those on the curriculum?
Modern plays.
Something like The Fighting Man. I mean, that'd be a good novel.
Yeah,
Pride and Prejudice is very slow moving, and it's all sort of character building the whole way through.
Well, those young people were all students at the VEC in Lucan in County Dublin. And in common with lots of young people around the country, one of the problems they face is lack of access to books. They are, however, particularly fortunate in that their school has been running a special project designed to encourage them to read and write. But there's little point in developing an interest if you can't get hold of the kind of books you'd like.
There is no library in Lucan. The local people have been agitating for a long time for a library, and it is promised, so there is one coming. But at the moment there is no library, so they have to, if they're buying books, they buy them in the local newsagents who do stock a small amount of books. There is no bookshop in the immediate Lucan area, but there is one in Leixlip, which isn't too far away. But they have to travel in order to get books, unfortunately.
And what about things like books at home or books at school?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, there is still a fair amount of reading in the homes. Surprising because people assume that, you know, the television has almost obliterated reading, but there is a fair amount of books still in circulation.
And can you manage here at school to give them anything as well?
Well, the school that we're in here is about to close. It has only about 4 months left. In fact, it is a proposed site for the new library. We will be moving, we'll be closed down completely here. All the staff and students will be moved into the new community college, which is about a half mile up the road. That has a beautiful library built in, and one of the first priorities is going to be to stock that with books, because as far as I'm concerned, the library is the heart and soul of a school.
Now, all the children we've been speaking to have been complaining about the books they have to read on the school curriculum. Do you agree with them?
I do, totally. In fact, listening to them, they sound exactly as I would have sounded if you heard me 20 years ago. I think that, if I may use an analogy, cultivating a reading habit is a bit similar to giving children food that at a certain age, you give them the food that their system is able to digest. You don't give a child food they're going to reject. You don't give them a chicken curry.
They were more interesting to read, like, you know. But like, Pride and Prejudice, it's quite boring, but at the moment, like, we've seen the video, it's getting a bit interesting. But like, Julius Caesar's so boring.
So what, there's a video of Pride and Prejudice that you've seen?
We've seen it. It was on the TV over Christmas and we got taped.
And did that make it better for you?
Yeah, it did, because we understand it more, like, you know, and we know what the characters are like. We've our own picture of them now.
What about Julius Caesar? Do you like Julius Caesar?
Oh, stop. Et tu, brute. Sick of this.
Doesn't matter.
You have to learn it off by heart.
You just have to learn it all.
All off by heart.
It's boring.
Shut modern
It's
place.
a very simple story for such a long play.
Yeah,
They just
the
kill
end
them
of
and
it,
they kill themselves.
yeah,
It's a very
kills them,
simple
yeah.
story. You know.
You're not going to talk about that. I know Julius Caesar. You're not going to get a job by saying I know Julius Caesar.
What I would like to see is that we would concentrate on cultivating an appetite, if I may continue with the analogy, to cultivate an appetite and forget about imposing taste. I think what the old curriculum that we're still tied to, what it's trying to do is impose a false taste before people have the appetite at all for reading.
I presume the same thing applies to the Irish curriculum.
I think that the Irish curriculum is even more problematic because the material that is appropriate to teenagers doesn't exist in the Irish language, and we badly need it to be written, so the Department of Education should start commissioning writers to write material suitable for teenagers.
And particularly for urban teenagers.
And particularly for urban teenagers, yeah.
Now, you've been trying to get around these problems here in this school with a scheme of your own. Can you tell me something about it?
Well, the scheme that you have in mind is the writer-in-residence scheme. When the SES scheme was announced a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago, I thought that it might be a very opportune time to apply for a writer to be employed in a school as a resource person, as a writer, not as a teacher. And the 2.5-day week would allow him to do a certain amount of work within the school, and yet would allow him plenty of time to do his own writing outside. So I advertised it. I got the approval, first of all, through the National Manpower Service, and then advertised it. And we had a chap called Joe Jackson appointed to the job. And Joe has been absolutely tremendous. He has related very well to the kids. He has tuned into their wavelength, and he speaks the same language as them. He knows exactly what their thoughts are, what ideas they want to articulate, and he has helped them enormously because they are able to articulate their ideas. They write their own poems, stories, and that.
Growing apart. The days passed quickly. Instead of growing closer, we only grew apart. Remember the night you walked into the room, the cold feeling as you entered. We looked at each other and said hello, and then turned to look the other way. It's going to be hard getting over you. It will take time for the broken heart to mend. But someday, when I stop loving you, I will find someone who will love me just as much as I loved you.
Joe, can you explain to me what you're doing with the teenagers here that's different from what they have to do in the syllabus?
Well, basically I'm trying to haul the English course into the second half of the 20th century, and also help them tap any potential they may have for creative writing.
Could you give me an example of the kind of thing you've done?
Well, to first find out what style of writing they were relating to, I had a competition in the school in which I asked them to give in one song lyric which they found most relevant to their lives, and 2/3 of the students in the school entered material. And the surprising thing was that it wasn't the kind of nonsense lyric one finds on pop videos. Many of them were album tracks, and most of the album tracks were on themes that were wholly relevant. I mean, be they about sexuality, drug situation, nuclear war, very relevant themes. So I found that they were tuning in at that level. So I used that to then show them how poetry, particularly modern poetry, is not that far removed from the lyrics they're reading.
And what was the response from them?
Well, at first they were astounded. I mean, one student even said that he found that it was a surprise to him to learn that there were poets still alive, which says a lot for what they're actually studying. And when they then found that the themes were relevant to their lives, it gave kind of a validation to their own lives, and they felt they could write about it. They could write from themselves and where they were living, where they were at. So they then started producing their own work.
The youth of today. Look at us, the youth of today, a generation with life, leaders of tomorrow's world, as we strive to make it right. All man's hate, fear and pain, I'm sure would quickly cease, if we could all join together in a community of peace. Love can only live and grow where there is respect and justice, away from all the hatred and futile destruction. We need to express the love we have and come together as one, to dream of far-off better days. For humanity must go on. We are just growing life, perhaps the beginning of prosperity, to free the community of depravity and from a bright new nation.
What's it done for them to be able to write about their own experience?
Well, I think it builds up the self-confidence, because I think often the culture, particularly in a vocational school, the culture they come from or are of is a popular culture, and that's very often denigrated, not only by parents and maybe by teachers. So to actually show respect for that, and to show that forms of writing or forms of art or that can come from there, builds up their own self-esteem, their self-image. And also to see these newer forms of reality presented to them within the school curriculum is not only outdated, it's also, let's say, a different style of life. You know, So then when they see their own forms being presented to them, they then kind of, as I say, it centres confidence on that.
I was wondering, what do you think would be the outcome of the year's experience for the children, having spent the time with you?
I think to counteract the negative effect of perhaps children coming from homes in which there isn't a habit of reading, and also to counteract the effect of the educational system which kills enjoyment of literature and also a student's potential for writing. And in terms of today, where a few teenagers even go into bookstores, I think what I've done is shown them that books are relevant to their lives, and you've developed a taste for literature and also an avenue of self-expression. So they go out with not just perhaps a growing interest in literature, but also a talent for, let's say, self-expression.
Night time this morning, the sun's not coming out. Nightmare this morning, nuclear falling out. No time this morning, missiles everywhere. No life this morning, killing over there. Night time this morning, the sky is all blocked. Nightmare this morning, the world is all shot. No time this morning, their reasons fallen through. No life this morning, who cares about you?
That was some of the